I wanted to like The Dreadful. On paper, it's a prestige genre play, a 15th century period piece where Natasha Kermani, set against the brutal backdrop of the War of the Roses, and acting as a spiritual reimagining of Kaneto Shindo's 1964 masterpiece Onibaba. But there is a massive gulf between elevated horror and a film that is simply tethered to its own slow-motion gravity. The aesthetic is aggressively bleak. It's a world of damp wool, flickering hearths, and a color grade that occasionally veers into muddy rather than atmospheric. It wants to be a haunting, psychological chamber piece about survival and isolation on the fringes of society, but it often settles for being a chore. If you're looking for a reason to rent The Dreadful, we need to talk about whether a high-concept pedigree can save a low-energy execution. Set during the mid-1400s, The Dreadful centers around Anne, played by Sophie Turner, and her mother-in-law, Morwen, played by Marcia Gay Harden. They live a grueling, hand-to-mouth existence on the outskirts of a society torn apart by civil war. They are scavengers in a land that has nothing left to give, bound together by necessity in a shared traumatic history that the film keeps frustratingly close to his chest. The status quo is shattered by the arrival of Jago, played by Kent Harington, a figure from their past whose presence acts as a catalyst for long-simmering tensions. The stakes aren't just about who survives the winter, it's about the psychological cost of that survival. Anne is desperate for a life beyond the dirt. Morwen is hardened by the pragmatism of the old world, and Jago represents a bridge to a past and a potential future that threatens to burn down the fragile sanctuary they've built. It's a classic three-hander setup, isolated location, mounting paranoia, and the looming shadow of the Onibaba influence. The idea that the real monsters aren't the soldiers in the distance, but the people we become when we're starving. When you sit down for a film that bills itself as a spiritual successor to Onibaba, you expect a certain level of primal kinetic energy instead. The Dreadful feels like it's wading through a literal swamp of its own making. Let's break down why this 15th century thriller struggles to keep its head above water. Visually, Natasha Kermani is clearly aiming for that A24 adjacent folk horror grind. Think The Witch, but with even less sunlight. There is a tactile nature to the production design. You can almost smell the wet wool and the stagnant water in their home. At its best, the cinematography captures the isolation of the English countryside with a cold, unforgiving lens. However, we got to talk about the color grading in this. There are several sequences, particularly in the interior night shots, where the image is so crushed and desaturated that it becomes a muddy mess. It's got this weird green hue to it. It just looks very unnatural, which isn't the style this movie is going for. It feels like a post-production attempt to hide the lack of visual scale, and it results in kind of flat look that robs the film of any texture. And the casting here, I gotta say, is distracting. Seeing Sophie Turner and Kit Harington back together in period costumes is clearly the primary marketing hook, I think. The problem, their chemistry is framed as romantic, and for anyone who spent a decade watching them play siblings or cousins or whatever on Game of Thrones, it feels fundamentally off. And I think a lot of their marketing went towards that because they were talking about, oh, we vomited after we kissed, and that's about the only marketing I saw for this movie. So, and that's not really what made me watch it either. I just like discovering these small movies. But it does feel like a meta distraction that the movie never quite overcomes. Sophie Turner isn't bad. She's doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. There's scenes early on where she's scavenging the battlefield. The look of weary, hollowed out desperation in her eyes is probably the most horror thing in the movie. Marcia Gay Harden is doing her best as well. She plays the mother-in-law with a jagged, territorial edge. She feels like she belongs in this mud, while Harington and Turner occasionally feel like they stepped off a photo shoot. And Harington, he's fine, I guess. He's just playing a variation of the brooding outsider we've seen him do better elsewhere. His arrival is supposed to bring a sharp intake of breath to the narrative. Instead, it kind of feels like a slow exhale. And my verdict on the pacing, if you're going to be slow, you have to be tense. The Dreadful is slow, but it's often just boring. There are long stretches of characters staring at the tree line or performing mundane chores that don't really build character or atmosphere. They just it feels like it's just killing time. The film relies on a mystery box structure regarding Jago's past and a looming twist that most genre fans will sniff out by the end of Act 1. Because the movie waits so long to reveal what's actually happening, the middle hour feels like it's spinning its wheels in the dirt. It wants to be a psychological pressure cooker, but the lid is leaking steam the whole time. Look, I'm being hard on the film because the source material it's riffing on is a masterpiece of tension. There is some absolutely wild stuff that happens in the third act, narrative choices, the reveals, that I cannot touch on here without ruining the experience for those who still want to brave the muck. The last part of this, it attempts to justify the previous 90 minutes of pretty boring movie, actually. But I'm not going to go into it here. I'll probably do an ending explain, so maybe check that out. If you are a diehard fan of the cast or a completionist of 15th century historical horror, you might find something to chew here. But for the rest of us looking for a visceral, effective genre experience, this is a tough sell. It's a remake that misses the point of the original's ferocity, trading psychological depth for a slow-moving plot and questionable technical choices. It's not dreadful in the way the title suggests. It's just a bit of a slog. So I'm giving The Dreadful a 1.5 out of 5 stars. I say this is an easy pass, but if you really want to experience a better version of this movie, just check out the 1964 classic Onibaba. But did you see The Dreadful? Let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. If you like this video, hit that like button and consider subscribing. If you want to support the channel a little further, hit that join button and join our memberships for only 99 cents. And check out my ending explain that should be by my head right about now. And I'll see you next time.